What up, friends? Lose Yourself to Dance, and today we're going to be reviewing Florence and the Machine's newest album, Dance Fever. This is the fifth album by UK-based indie pop band Florence and the Machine. This is a group that fluctuates in terms of sound as the years go by. Florence and the rest of the band kind of switch off in dealing with these roaring and anthemic pop tunes and these softer and more mellow singer-songwriter tracks, depending on the mood. I'd say that overall their discography is pretty solid. Their debut album, Lungs, is my personal favorite, and the one that I think has the most bite to it, but the rest of their discography is also pretty great, even if it occasionally does fall into some sort of mainstream pop tropes here and there. Dance Fever sees them combining all of their other sounds into something that's captivating, but that, along with the very personal and introspective lyrics on this album, make this probably their strongest record since their debut. King makes for a pretty slick opener to the record, I think, with a very driving yet subtle beat and elegant vocals. The simplicity works, though, as the song largely deals with a turmoil that's inside Florence Welch, with her kind of struggling between settling down and forming a family, or kind of continuing on her music endeavors. I'm loving all of the instrumentals that are added as the song progresses, from the background vocals and weighty piano of the verses to the bombastic finish of the bridge and outro. Florence's vocal cadence also solidifies this struggle, with her sounding very passionate at times, yet also very drained at other times. This shows how much of a toll this is taking on her. However, she still calls herself king, as ultimately she is still in charge of her own life despite others' expectations. The pace picks up a bit with Free, with some fuzzy beats and guitar alongside these twinkling bells added in for good measure. I'm loving those strings that are added as support, and the track in general just has a really good progression that builds and builds until we reach that shimmering chorus near the end. It's anthemic, yet still more nuanced than a lot of the more bombastic tracks that the band has released prior to this, which I think works in its favor. The lyrics describing how Florence has these anxieties, fears, and doubts, and everybody's kind of looking at her like she's crazy, definitely hit hard. However, this is subverted through the very light and airy instrumental, alongside Florence feeling free when she's listening to music and making music as well. Choreomania is a pretty interesting one, I will say. The first half is very sparse, with only a simple beat in her vocals. However, like the last track, it does steadily build as time goes on. I'm digging the added instrumentals, especially the focus on the strings here. However, I feel like it builds for too long. When the climax hits on the bridge, it's pretty powerful, but the song just did not have a lot going on up until that point. The lyrics about this dancing plague that the song gets its name from are fine, but they feel kind of out of place for the record, and they also seem a little bit vague for my liking too. However, I'm a big fan of the lyrics on the bridge, with Florence essentially saying how so many people think rock is dead right now. However, it's not really dead, it just doesn't look like how these people expected it to, or it didn't look like how it used to when they were into rock. So it's like these people think just because it's not how we like rock, rock is dead. She also compares it to the reactions that evangelicals may have if Jesus came back as a woman or in a dress. The weaker moments on the record tend to be the slower and more stripped down ones, and Back in Town is a fairly good example of that. The lyrics are definitely good, depicting a very vivid scene about going out on the town with a friend or maybe even a lover and just kind of taking in the sights. However, I feel like a very artsy and ethereal track like this deserved a more layered and glistening instrumental. The fairly isolated and simplistic instrumental that it has right now just kind of makes it feel stagnant, and it doesn't really back up the lyrics all that much. It's just a bit too vibey, and I'm not really getting the vivid nature in the instrumental as much as I am in the lyrics. Girls Against God is another fantastic tune with a good beat and a very raw vibe to it. The soulful background vocals make for a great highlight piece, and the introduction of the subtle sax was also pretty pleasant. This album tends to have a very personal memoir feel to it, and I feel like the lyrics on this one largely nail that. Florence looking back at when she was young and going to shows, realizing that she'll never be able to relive those experiences again, is pretty powerful. It's essentially showcasing Florence's fight against aging and, getting older. The addition of the fuzzy guitar and the strings near the end showcase these frustrations with time and God, in her case specifically, as she essentially feels cheated that she'll never be able to have these experiences again. She's also feeling how these moments seem to just pass her by too quickly. Dream Girl Evil is probably one of the best songs on the record, feeling very much like her Lungs days in the raw angst that's present here. The instrumentals also feel a bit grittier on this one, with the tried and true bass guitar and drums coming into the forefront. Her vocal cadence here is also brilliantly taunting, essentially mocking the societal expectations of women and how they're supposed to be the support roles in the relationships, and also how many men like the idealized versions of women that they create in their head rather than the actual women that they're seeking. The riffs are punchy, the mood is dark, and the outro is a triumphant climax to the song too. Cassandra is another track with a nice progression to it from the acoustic intro to the more piano-driven beat as the song gets going. The bells have a foreboding elegance to them, and the addition of the darker-sounding guitar is great, and there's even like an organ that makes an appearance here and there too. The track mainly talks about how Florence feels like the worst fears that she has almost always come true in her life, and how she feels almost cursed by this. This is especially present in the rising turmoil that kind of boils over in the bridge and last chorus, and she even makes a comparison to Cassandra in the myth of Apollo, how he essentially curses her with the ability of telling prophecies that are true, but nobody believes her. It's pretty cool. I'm always down for those mythological comparisons. Daffodil is another one of my favorites, with a gritty and driving beat and dark aesthetic. The guitar strums and sinister piano add a lot of personality to this track, almost feeling like an ancient folk tale or something at times. Florence's vocals also kick the dramatic effects up to 11, with Florence almost sounding like she's fighting back insanity or something. It's fitting though, because this song largely deals with Florence trying to find the small happinesses in picking flowers or going out on walks while she was under the COVID lockdowns. That outro is also a pretty cool, intense moment that we don't often hear from the band, so I like that it was included on this one. My Love is probably the most danceable tune on here thanks to the groovy bass line and funky keys. That chorus is seriously catchy, man. It has these, like, disco vibes that fit the album's namesake, I think. This song is so lush thanks to the overall instrumental and the huge backing chorus behind Florence here. It's an interesting way to tackle writer's block, as she is essentially creating a song so upbeat and catchy that she has to write something. It's not like the deepest track out there, but it is a vibe, so I like it. The Bomb is not the most interesting out there though, unfortunately, feeling almost underdeveloped compared to everything else on the record. It's largely similar to Back in Town, where the lyrics are pretty good, but the instrumental backing it just doesn't have a lot of power or intricacy to it, and this one almost even has less to go off of in the lyrics in that regard too. Morning Elvis is the somber yet also uplifting sounding tune that ends the record. She's essentially describing a night where she missed her flight to go to Elvis's Graceland because she was essentially hungover, and she uses this as a sort of metaphor comparison to her struggles with alcoholism and sobriety. The use of the guitar and background vocals here create a very hazy ambience. However, like the other slower songs on here, it does tend to stay in one place for a while. However, in contrast, I do think this instrumental overall has a lot more texture to it, and the weight of the lyrics and vocals help progress this song in a way that feels pretty powerful in comparison to the other slower songs here. This was a pretty intimate yet layered experience by Florence and the gang. The songs were definitely well crafted overall, and the vocal performances and songwriting tended to be pretty top-notch. I think the best tracks on here tended to be the more upbeat ones and the ones with a grittier bite to them. There are some definite winners on this album, I think, quite a lot of them in fact. However, some of the slower moments tended to break up the pacing and just kind of slow things down almost too much. The sound of the record overall was fairly consistent, however, again, having these more acoustic-oriented tracks alongside more dance pop tunes like My Love felt a bit awkward. I feel like having more tracks like Daffodil, Dream Girl, Evil, and even My Love would have helped solve this problem of having songs and sounds that are similar, yet almost not similar enough at times. This isn't really the biggest issue though, and I do think this was a very good project overall. I am feeling a strong 7 on this newest album by Florence and the Machine. Maybe light 8, but for now, I'm saying strong 7. Of course, we do need to talk about album covers on this show, and I think this is an okay album cover. My biggest complaint is that it feels a bit collagey at times, but not in the best way. It's a bit too busy for my liking. I think what I would do is I would remove all of the vines and the butterflies from it and just leave her in front of the moon. I think that's a very striking yet simple image. I feel like it fits the delicate yet powerful nature of this record. The font is also something I'm not too keen on. It's a bit too blocky for my liking. I feel like having a fairly simple yet smooth script would have worked, or just no text at all. I feel like just the image of her in front of the moon is powerful enough, but if you wanted some text, I feel like that could work too. But of course, those are just my thoughts on this newest album by Florence and the Machine. What do you guys think? Do you think this is their best album yet, or is this one just not really gelling with you? Let me know. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, ring the bell to dance with me, and until the next one, farewell.